Hi, Mr. Mulcair. It's James Cudmore here from the CBC with my hand up. I just want to talk about the TPP, if I could. You've said in past that you and your party...
After all that, the CBC is not going to talk to me about culture or CBC cuts. We're going straight down.
I feel like you're putting me in an awkward position if you wanted me... Yeah. Are you saying raises for all of us?
It's not like it's something I've ever done to a journalist before.
Well, turn around, I guess, is fair play then. You've said in past that the NDP are enthusiastic supporters of trade with the Pacific Partnership. Yeah. Today, you seem to be suggesting that this deal is not one that you're an enthusiastic supporter of. But just before you get there, I wanted to, for the purposes of argument, proposed an idea of the argument, proposed the idea that the government probably, the Conservatives probably didn't walk into this negotiation with the goal of selling out dairy farmers, as you put it, however, have found themselves in whatever position they find themselves today. What's wrong with that supposition that this might be the best deal that Canada could get?
Boy, there's so many levels to that question. I think I'm just going to go straight to the heart of it. Yeah. What I'm going to say is this. What we did say, and it pertains on, again, still to this day, is that trade deals overall on an even playing field where you have countries that have similar labor laws and environmental laws so that there's not just no economic dumping but no social or environmental dumping. Overall, those are going to be good things. But you also have to make sure that it's not negatively affecting ourselves here. Mr. Harper, today I caught most of his press conference. He was boasting about the fact that we'd gone to from a handful of trade deals to over 50. So it's like a lot of things that Mr. Harper does. He says that he's accomplished things. So let's look at the results of that plan of his, going to over 50 trade deals. This year, 2015, we've had the worst trade deficits in Canadian history. So that part of his plan hasn't worked. I mean, in public administration, we say that which gets measured gets done. So let's look at what's been done and let's measure it. We've lost 400,000 well-paid manufacturing jobs already. Unifor calculates that this deal will cost at least 20,000 more jobs. But that's just a number. That's a statistic. You were with us yesterday as we did a tour of 6 different towns in southwestern Ontario already devastated by Stephen Harper's failed policies. Every one of those 20,000 jobs is a Canadian family that loses their livelihood, and the NDP will stand up for those families.
Evaluated what the consequences of not being a part of the Trans-Pacific Partnership might be for Canada?
Well, you know, that's one of the arguments that you're going to be hearing a lot from the other side, and I can tell you confidently that you're still going to be able to buy a Honda, and you're still going to be able to buy a nice bottle of Kim Crawford white wine from New Zealand. We trade already with all of these countries, but deal after deal, Stephen Harper has been hurting Canadian families. This deal particularly hurts Canadian families whose livelihood is gained in the auto sector. 20,000 jobs will be lost. We know that, and I've already talked to some of the representatives just in the province of Quebec, the dairy deals that the Conservatives have signed so far are costing hundreds of millions of dollars to dairy farmers in that province. I was at one of those farms on the weekend, and it was the 5th generation on the same farm. They're very worried that Mr. Harper is throwing them overboard. And it sounds like a small percentage, but that percentage is added to the other percentage that was already included in the European deal. That's added to the fact that the Conservatives have allowed wholesale milk proteins to come over the border because they've been improperly classified, and that's been nailing our dairy production industry. You know, just in Quebec, dairy represents 92,000 direct and indirect jobs. So this is a serious topic for all Canadians. It's a failed policy. Mr. Harper has failed. He has the worst job creation record of any prime minister since the Second World War. So in the face of facts, he keeps throwing out ideological arguments. They don't hold water. And the NDP is going to stand up against this trade deal because it's going to be hurting Canadian families.
Bonjour, Monsieur Mulcair. Tamara Teresco de Radio-Canada.
Tamara Teresco from CBC, and I have 2 questions for you since you're defending the rights of francophones in the country, and I'm the only one here. You're the only one in the country? No, amongst my journalist colleagues here, we understand that you don't feel bound by the agreement. What could you have negotiated better? What do you think of the compensation plan for farmers in particular? Is there nothing in the partnership that you could find agreeable? Let's not forget that Mr. Harper has already set precedent with Newfoundland and Labrador. In order to gain their signature, he had to ask Newfoundland and Labrador to abandon a process which would guarantee them a certain proportion of value added to their fish. In other words, there'd be processing factories in Newfoundland. They asked them to abandon that. Stephen Harper promised more than $300 million in compensation, and now he is going back on this deal. One cannot trust Mr. Harper. Now, on the other hand, his promise to compensate for the loss of the value of quota is completely artificial, because it isn't the quota that's going to lose value. He says he's going to also compensate for loss of revenue, and he puts forward a large number. The problem is that the milk producers, and I spoke to the president of the Canadian Dairy Farmers, are furious because they're spending millions and millions of dollars in ads for their products, and none of that is going to come back to them. It'll be complete stagnation because any increase of the market henceforth will go to the outside, to the foreign markets. So they're frustrated, very disappointed by the Conservatives' behavior, and they also know that the border, which supports their industry, has become very porous, with the Conservative government refuses to protect them against tricks like the importation of milk proteins. So on all aligned, complete failure from Mr. Harper for the dairy industry. And let us remember that there's 92 direct and indirect jobs involved in the sector. You were with us at that farm over the weekend. Another question. Mr. Trudeau announced this morning important measures to help students in Canada without spending more. He says he'd use tax cuts to finance those promises. Do you intend to announce something for students between now and the end of the campaign? Since the beginning, I insist that people should remember one thing, that the last time the Liberals were in power, Mr. Martin cut 24% of social transfers to provinces, including education, post-secondary education. So words are one thing, but actions speak louder than words. And in the case of the Liberals, all of their past record demonstrates to us that we can't trust them on these matters. Now, the NDP is proposing something rather simple here, which is to remove the interest on student loans immediately. Since I come from a family of 10 children, I had to borrow to undertake my studies. I know what it is. It hurts. And throughout Canada, I've met students, and I learned, and I was quite surprised to learn, that up to $60 million of loans at the end of studies is not a rare event anymore. I find that completely unsupportable, and we'll have the opportunity to speak more to this point when we launch our program.
Indulge me. My first question is, we heard you yesterday say repeatedly that about this TPP deal.
Me? Repeat myself. Come on.
You said that there were three sort of stipulations, and one of them was about the auto sector. If it didn't protect the auto sector, that you would not be bound to it.
That's right.
What we learned today is that there are changes to the rules of origin, the rural origin, dropping it down to about 45%.
Well, 40, as low as 40, yeah.
So with that change, is that significant enough for you to say right now that if you are elected, you will not have Canada be a part of this agreement?
If elected, Canada will not be part of an agreement that removes 20,000 Canadian jobs, period. And every time we say that, it's important to remember that every job you and I just referenced is actually a family that will lose their livelihood. You were with us, Katie, yesterday as we toured 6 different cities in southwestern Ontario, hard hit by Stephen Harper's abject failure on the job front. Stephen Harper, and this is not a question of an opinion, it's a fact. Stephen Harper, as Prime Minister, has the worst job creation records of any Prime Minister since the Second World War. On his watch, we've lost 400,000 manufacturing jobs already. I won't accept to see another 20,000 families lose their livelihood because of Stephen Harper's inability to negotiate a good deal.
And my second question is, are you concerned about the implications this could have on Canada's reputation as a trading country, and what that could do to Canada's reputation and for the impact on possible future trade deals?
Well, don't forget, we already trade with each and every one of those countries, and it's inevitable that if you're negotiating something like this in the last days in the run-up to a general election, that not everybody's going to agree with the government. I've been standing up to Stephen Harper on any number of subjects. I can guarantee you he doesn't enjoy going to question period when it's me asking him the questions. But now it's about choice. Now it's about choosing a new government. Across the country, the number one thing that I hear is that Canadians want change. Well, with an NDP government, they're going to get positive change of what we can accomplish together. And I'll let Justin Trudeau and Stephen Harper try to convince you that losing 20,000 more well-paid Canadian jobs is a good thing. I know it's a bad thing for 20,000 Canadian families.
Hi, Mr. Mulcair. Gloria Galloway.
Hi, Gloria.
Hey. So the inboxes of the journalists on the bus this morning have been flooded with endorsements of the deal, frankly, by folks like the meat marketers, the soybean guys, the cranberry guys, all kinds of people who are saying, you know what, this could mean huge things for our industry. We're going to be going all over the world now with our stuff. What do you tell folks who are now excited about this deal that you're going to put a kibosh on it?
Well, I'm going to tell them that Canada deserves better than Stephen Harper, who has the worst record for job creation of any Prime Minister since the Second World War. And I'm going to tell them that we deserve better than sacrificing 20,000 well-paid Canadian jobs in the auto sector because Stephen Harper doesn't know how to negotiate a deal. And I'm going to tell them that an NDP government will do better than that, because Canadians are so tired of being told that they have no choice. And if Stephen Harper's plan was working, I heard him boast today about his 50-plus trade deals. That's supposed to be his answer to everything. I've negotiated 50 deals. But guess what? This year, 2015, Canada has the worst trade deficit in its history. Mr. Harper's approach is not working. It's already cost 400,000 well-paid manufacturing jobs. There are 300,000 more unemployed people today than when the crisis hit in 2008. And guess what? I'm going to stand up and fight for those 20,000 Canadian jobs.
Mr. Mulcair, Terry Pedwell of the Canadian Press. Terry Pedwell of the Canadian Press, Mr. Mulcair. I'm just wondering, you're the official opposition. Your job is to provide an alternative form of government should you be elected. If you were elected on October 19th, what would you be looking for in a Trans-Pacific Partnership agreement? What does the NDP need to reach an agreement?
Well, for example, with regard to arts and culture, I'll make sure that our arts and culture sector is protected in that agreement, and Stephen Harper won't release the deal. But I'll also make sure that it's a win-win. Mr. Harper is always about stark choices that are more often than not false choices. Oh, do you want the environment or do you want the economy? A Prime Minister is responsible for taking care of both. Oh, do you want to be safe in your community or do you want to have your rights and freedoms respected? Well, guess what? A Prime Minister has the obligation to take care of both. And in this case, it is possible to grow trade without throwing 20,000 Canadian families out of work. That's what this is about. Thank you.